Hello, everybody. This is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Cover the 49ers and the Inside the 49ers blog for the Press Democrat. Wanted to come on and share my thoughts of some of the goings on at day 2 of the NFL Scouting Combine. A big day for 49ers fans when it comes to content that was given out today by John Lynch in particular. So wanted to go through a bunch of the different things that he had to say. He had quite a bit to say today, starting with the quarterbacks. We'll get there in just a second. Before I get there, though, want to say hey to Ekim. He reaches out, says, "Hey Jack, hope you're doing well." You know, it's funny when you go back through this day and you think about what was said regarding the quarterbacks. It's all quite interesting. It started off this morning, bright and early, before a lot of folks on the West Coast were even awake on Good Morning Football on NFL Network, and John Lynch joined Pete Schrager over there, and the topic of Trey Lance came up, and Lynch had a number of good positive things to say, basically talking about the fact that the 49ers are in love with the progress that they saw from Lance throughout last year, that Lance is everything that they expected from him to be when they made the big move to get up to 3 and used all that draft capital to get him. The way that he carries himself, the intangibles that he brings, the talent, all those things. And the 49ers are very excited about what they have with Trey Lance and what he brings to the board. And one of the things that I would say when it comes to Trey Lance and John Lynch's comments is this is nothing new. You got to remember this was going back, it was the day before the first preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Lynch did an interview in which he talked about the quarterback situation then, and that Trey Lance at that point was pushing Jimmy Garoppolo, that he was very happy with the progress that they were seeing from Garoppolo, from Trey Lance, and that Lance was pushing Garoppolo for the starting job. That was the comment from John Lynch back before week 1 of the preseason. So Lynch has been pretty high on Trey Lance the entire time. So his comments today don't surprise me. I don't think there's any kind of behind the scenes discussion there. I think that Lynch has always been the guy that's in Lance's corner. If there's anything as far as that goes, it's more of trying to get somebody else on board with it. Maybe Kyle Shanahan. I don't know, but I believe that Trey Lance has always been the guy when it comes to John Lynch, and that he's the guy they want to get. So makes sense to me, and that's good news for 49er fans as we go through this off season. So much discussion as far as regarding Trey Lance. Is he ready to go? We keep hearing that repeatedly, and I will say, like I've said a few times before, and I'll continue to say throughout this offseason, I believe that Trey Lance is ready to step in and help the 49ers win football games. It's going to be interesting to see if he can get to the same level of winning as what we saw under Jimmy Garoppolo. There's a lot of things that go into that, but I do have a lot of faith in him and what Lance brings to the table. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch that play out. Rob, how you doing? Great to see you as well. Hi to you. Yeah, and like Monk Savage says, and more, you forgot that he's everything we expected and more. Thank you for the and more part, because that is very true. Very true. In terms of Jay Christopher asked, any speed wide receivers, also known as Tyreek Hill type with potential? I don't know. I don't think there's anybody out there that the 49ers can bring in that's going to be like Tyreek Hill, but we know that the 49ers are pretty well set. Their first 3 receivers are Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Juwan Jennings. There was a Mac Hollins from the Miami Dolphins is a name that I'm going to throw out there because he kind of fits the mold of what they're looking for as a 4th or 5th option. He's kind of he could be this year's Trent Sherfield. He's put up better numbers as a receiver throughout his career than Sherfield did before he came to the 49ers. And Hollins is also a special teams ace. So I wouldn't expect the 49ers to go out and spend big or draft high on a wide receiver. There may be 1 or 2 that fall in the draft, and they might pick up somebody there. I know Watkins is a big name for 49er fans. If he's there and the 49ers decide to get him, with their late in the 3rd round, I wouldn't be surprised. That would be a good spot for somebody like that if they're going to be able to utilize him in a multiple ways. So there's that. And then the other comments today from Lynch was regarding Jimmy Garoppolo, and that was, at the podium, he was asked about Garoppolo. He went into a long answer when it came to Garoppolo in terms of his situation, about the injured shoulder, how he hurt that in the Dallas game, how it was injured when he was protecting his thumb instead of putting his hand down and possibly injuring his thumb. He took the brunt of the landing on his shoulder. It's going to be a surgery. He mentioned, it's anytime you go under surgery, it's not a minor deal, but at the same time, the way that it's described from the doctors and folks that he's talked to, it is a minor surgery for Garoppolo, and Garoppolo is going to be fine. He went on to say that a trade, Jimmy's still part of the 49ers at this point, but there are a number of teams that are interested in bringing him in. So there are discussions ongoing with regards to the possibility of a trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. The one thing that I did notice that I'm not sure has been pointed out, I didn't point it out earlier on my Twitter feed, was that he went through a very long explanation as to what's going on with the throwing shoulder for Garoppolo. But then he also says, I haven't even talked to Jimmy yet, but it sounds like that's the decision right now, to go ahead and have that done. And you guys know the same thing I know. That must be really reassuring to all the 49er fans out there, that your general manager hasn't talked to the quarterback that they're expecting to trade, who yesterday the announcement was made that he needs to have surgery on his throwing shoulder. So it's a interesting, just a real interesting comment there from Lynch. And it was kind of at the end of a long response, but according to John Lynch, he has not yet as of the time that he spoke with the media, which was around noon Pacific time today, or maybe a little bit earlier than that. But early today, he had not yet talked to Jimmy Garoppolo to get an idea of that situation. So we don't know. As far as we know right now, from what John Lynch said, he knows as much as all of us. So it's an interesting situation that we're going to have to all watch play out, and maybe he'll be able to get on the phone with him. This is just the latest in a long line of lack of communication or inability to get on the same page between Garoppolo and the 49ers when it comes to messaging. We saw this repeatedly throughout the season, where Kyle Shanahan would go to the podium to talk about an injury of Garoppolo. You remember, he had the calf at one point, and then he had the thumb later. But both times, every time that there's been an issue with Garoppolo's health, the coaching staff or the front office has said one thing, and then Garoppolo's come up and said something not quite the same, or in a different direction. And here's another one, because it definitely sounds like this was a situation in which the 49ers were not aware that Garoppolo was going to make the decision to get a surgery on that throwing shoulder. And I think he's definitely putting them in a rough situation. E. Kim points out in the comments that Jimmy, he believes that Jimmy's going to be cut, that there won't be a team that's going to trade for him. The team does need immediate cap space, and they can do that by a release. It's an interesting release as well. If they do release him, Garoppolo has $7.5 million in guaranteed money due to injury that would come his way. So if the 49ers were to cut Jimmy Garoppolo, they would not save $25.5 million against the cap. They would save $18 million against the cap, because they would have a $7.5 million cap hit for Garoppolo until he signs with another team. That $7.5 million in guaranteed money for injury purposes does have offset language in it. So what that means for the 49ers is they would have, if they do end up having to cut him, they would have to eat that $7.5 million up front. And then once Garoppolo gets signed by a new team, he would, the 49ers would get their money back if he signs a contract that's $7.5 million or more. It offsets, it balances out. So that's kind of where the 49ers are at this moment. I for one, I understand that there is a possibility that he will be cut by the 16th. I would still lean towards the fact that somebody is going to trade for him. It seems to me, based on the conversation information that John Lynch said, well, he said a lot today. And again, he said a lot about Jimmy Garoppolo, but hadn't talked to him based on what he said. So if we're going to take him for his word, he did say that there has been a lot of interest and there's been discussions with around Garoppolo. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how this news works out. It definitely one of the pieces that did sound like it caught him off guard a bit, because one of the things that he did say was that, as of right now, he's a little bit worried about the 49ers and Jimmy, because this is all new information. And, there's been some discussions with teams to continue to do that. But as of right now, Garoppolo is a part of the 49ers. And quite frankly, it might come down to them having to release him. And if they do, like I said, they'll get their money back. It's just they won't be able to save face and pick something up in return. Do I think that this in any way shows that the 49ers made the wrong decision with what they did with the quarterback position in 2021 with the 49ers? I don't. I feel like the 49ers had a better season this year than they would have if they hadn't started Garoppolo, at least early on. It might have gotten better as the year went on, but I think that the 49ers might not have made it to the playoffs if Garoppolo didn't start week one and move forward. There's no way of knowing if that's right or wrong, but I don't feel like they did anything wrong in that direction. I feel like, the only way that we're going to find, we might know probably in about 2 years, to be honest with you, because if here's what's going to happen. If Trey Lance comes out and struggles next year and the 49ers struggle as a result of Trey Lance, the comments and the yelling that you're going to get are going to be all about how the 49ers should have started Trey Lance in 2021 to get him ready for 2022. And then, that's what the yelling will be about. And then when they come out in 2023, and if he plays fine, they're still going to get it. But if he comes out and he plays the way that he's supposed to, that we expect him to play, and everybody who keeps yelling about that he's ready to go, if you follow 49ers fans on Twitter and you follow me, because I just told you that I feel like he's ready. If he comes out and plays the way that everybody expects, then it'll be quiet, and all the shouting that's going on right now about Garoppolo and the contract and why did the 49ers not move on from Lance at the time or from Garoppolo early before 2021 will go away. So we'll see how it works out. I think that it makes sense for the 49ers what they did. Why would the Commanders trade a pick when they can have him as a free agent? Why would anybody make trades for guys that are going to be free agents? We see this all the time. The reason that you do is because there's multiple teams that are trying to get somebody's services. And if you are able to pull off a trade, instead of allowing them to hit free agency, you dictate where he goes. At this moment right now, you can make a trade, you can make him yours. If the 49ers release him, now you're in a bidding war amongst who knows how many teams to try to bring him in, and you no longer control your own destiny. And so that's why a team would go out and make a trade for somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo at this moment, or over the course of the next 2 weeks before free agency hits. Because in order to make sure that you get the player you want, that's the one way that you can do it. You can make that move to secure the player. It's similar to in the draft, right? When you hear about teams trading up for a player, usually teams are trading up for a player because there's one specific person that they want to get, and they want to make sure that they are able to secure him. He might have been able to fall to him, but you never know for sure. And so you make the move and you go get the player. So that's where I think things fall there. So there's your Garoppolo news and your Trey Lance news. Richard asked the questions, when are we going to restructure contracts to get money for free agency? That's going to be happening, Richard. We're going to be seeing that, I think, over these next couple of weeks. Remember, the 49ers by March 16th is the date here. March 16th is the date that the 49ers have to be under the salary cap. Depending on whether you look at over the cap or spell track, there's different numbers. It depends on what happens as of March 16th when free agency hits. That's the start of the new league year at 1:00 on that day. The 49ers top 51 contracts need to be under the salary cap. So right now, when you hear reports from myself and some others that the 49ers are over, that's because if you take the top 40, I think there's 44 players signed. They're over the cap, and of those 44 players, 11 of those are players that were signed to futures and reserve contracts. There may be some of those contracts that haven't yet been processed, so we don't know exactly where they stand in terms of their numbers. But if all of the contracts that have been announced are processed, then the 49ers would be over the cap a little bit. They could get under it by just making a couple of moves. All it would take was a restructure of maybe Eric Armstead, maybe a restructure of Jimmy Ward. Those are your top two. So I would expect the 49ers, they're going to be under it. They have to be under it by the 16th of March. So we're definitely going to start hearing some news. You've seen it pick up this week, big time pickup this yesterday and today in terms of, John Lynch talking today. And then just when you get the news yesterday from Adam Schefter on the injury to Garoppolo. So we're at that point now where the news of around the 49ers is going to definitely start to pick up. So it's the perfect time for me to head out for a few days this weekend. So that's why I'm getting in here and trying to get as much of my information out as I can, because I'm going to pretty much be offline starting Friday through Tuesday, just because I haven't taken any vacation time. The last time I took vacation was right before the 2019 draft. And that worked out well for the 49ers because they got Deebo Samuel and Nick Bosa, both of which were part of the conversations today. It was asked, Lynch was asked about Bosa and Samuel and an extension getting done for them. Basically, what Lynch stated is that it's going to be a challenge because those players are so good. But in his mind, those players are going to be 49ers. They're foundational to what they do on the field. They're special on and off the field in their own way, and they are big-time leaders for the team. And he went on to say that a lot of times when it comes down to these kind of things, it's all about timing. People, they know it needs to get done. And when both sides have the motivation to get a deal done, it can work out. On the timing piece, he didn't say a whole lot as far as that, and I don't expect him to. These things are always fluid. My expectation with these is it's going to be a long summer of waiting for those deals to get done. I would say you're probably going to get a deal. If their history suggests anything, the deal for going back to, the extension for George Kittle and the extension for Fred Warner, those were both signed right before training camp started. I think one of them might have been after training camp started. So we're looking at probably late July before we get resolution to an extension for Deebo Samuel. And if there is an extension that's going to come this year for Nick Bosa, I think in some ways it'll be better for the 49ers to get Bosa under wraps now. But I think there also may be a situation in which they go ahead and they just pick up the 5th-year option and let it roll out that way. Richard with a good question. Do you think they trade someone else as far as a surprise trade? He says, I don't know who they would trade. When you look at their roster, Mike McGlinchey is a name that a lot of folks have talked about trading, but that doesn't make sense just considering the injury that he's coming off of, which is quite frankly a more severe injury than even what Jimmy Garoppolo was dealing with the injury to his throwing shoulder. Beyond that, you're starting to get into the core of the team. I don't, maybe Dre Greenlaw. If we're talking about a trade, Dre Greenlaw is really the only other name that I can think of that would make sense. I don't know if Dre Greenlaw would be a surprise trade at this point. I think he's somebody who a number of folks have been pointing to as a trade candidate because of the way that Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles and Azeez Al-Shaair played last year. Azeez Al-Shaair in particular, and then you have Flanagan-Fowles as well. Both those guys are free agents, as either restricted free agents or exclusive rights free agents. So they're going to be back with the 49ers. But Dre Greenlaw may not be there. There may be a move there to help maybe lower the cap space a little bit. And maybe they go out and get a young linebacker in the draft as well to kind of build that position up for down the road to kind of get back into the rookie cap numbers. So in terms of a surprise trade, Richard, I would say go with Dre Greenlaw, because beyond that, I don't know who else you could even really think of as a surprise at this point with the 49ers, just because of their they're so their core. They don't have very many players to begin with, and what most of the guys that they have are their core unit. They're going to be filling in around it with these exclusive rights free agents and the restricted free agents. Those are core players as well. So it'll be the unrestricted free agents are the ones that are going to be a little interesting to watch. And I just mentioned Mike McGlinchey. We got a little bit of an update today on McGlinchey as well. Not a whole lot, really, when you really get down to it. He was asked, it was actually the first question of John Lynch's press conference with the full media that was on attendance. He was asked to provide an update on McGlinchey's progress. And basically what Lynch said is he's doing well. He had a pretty significant surgery to repair that. It was the quad tendon in his right leg. He's doing like he always does, which is attacking this thing full speed, 100%. The rehab is going well. They're pleased with the progress that he's making. As far as a return to the lineup, they say that they're going to give him all the time that he needs. Then they only want to wait. And they want to wait till he is fully healthy before they bring him back in and capable of playing at the level that he's capable of playing. So it is good to know that McGlinchey is doing a good job with his rehab and that he's finding some success there. It'll be definitely something to keep an eye on as we move forward in this offseason period, because the health of Mike McGlinchey, I think, might affect the way that the 49ers draft come the end of April, May. And it'll definitely have some impact on the roster when that time comes and his ability to get out there and start. And Dusty Gold asks if there's any update on Kinlaw and Ford. And thanks for asking, because that's one of the topics that I was going to hit. And yes, there is an update on Javon Kinlaw in particular. According to John Lynch, Kinlaw, his rehab has been going good. He had that surgery down after the injury. I think it was week 5 when he was injured. He had the surgery. His progress sounds good. It also sounds like what he's done is that he went out and he's actually been working out in Los Angeles with the same training staff who worked with Nick Bosa following Bosa's ACL injury at the beginning of last year. So we all saw what happened with Nick Bosa. He came back this year and had one of the better seasons in the NFL at 15 and a half sacks, way more than what he had as a rookie. Definitely more impactful there. So if Javon Kinlaw can come back and be fully healthy, really for the first time in his NFL career, it was known that he had some issues with his knee as far back as the scouting combine. The 49ers still took the chance on him, and it's something that's been bothering him all along. And they went in there and they found some issues with the knee that had previously been missed. So as far as the update there, it's really positive, as Swansong says in the comments. It's definitely very positive on Kinlaw. And that was an injury that happened a little bit earlier. Knees are, they do a pretty good job of fixing up knees nowadays. And like I said, if he's working out with the same folks that got Nick Bosa ready to go, and so if he's able to come back in anywhere close to that, that'll be fantastic for the 49ers. There was no update on Richard. There was no update on how Justin Skule is doing with returns to his rehab, but how he performs, that definitely is something that could help the offensive line, because Skule is a guy who I believe was in line to compete for the swing tackle position last offseason. I think that was really part of when they brought in Jalen Moore, the expectation that was that Skule was going to compete with him. And then you had Skule go down with the torn, I believe it was his knee that he tore up during the mini camp, and that all changed. And so that's when Tom Compton became more of a piece there. So we'll see how that all plays out with Skule, but Skule would be an important piece for the 49ers to get him back, get him healthy, because the 49ers, as we just talked about, they're going to need as much depth along the offensive line as they can with McGlinchey coming back from his injury. Skule might be able to be a little bit ahead of him in terms of return. He should be, considering when that injury took place. So let's keep an eye on Justin School as one of the chess pieces for the 49ers along the offensive line coming back. And then Aaron, great to see you. He says, any update on if the Niners will restructure any deals and open up some money? That wasn't anything that I've seen. The only transcript, John Lynch did a couple of different media sessions. So he did the media session that we all saw on YouTube, where that was open to the national media. Everybody was there. The transcripts were out on that one, and I watched it and did some transcriptions from that and read it and gone through that. There was also a secondary meeting with some of the folks, the Bay Area media folks that were out there, the regular beat writers that were able to be in Indianapolis today. So some of the nuggets that I'm posting, I'm sharing with you guys on this are from that as well. So it's both of the times that Lynch spoke today. We haven't heard anything though as far as restructures, but there's definitely going to be some of this. It's going to have to happen in order for the 49ers to get under the cap where they're going to need to be, because this Garoppolo thing is hanging over their heads. How about them Niners? Jack might not be a popular pick, but would you consider Flacco as Lance's backup mentor? He's super cheap at less than $1 million. Absolutely. This is a name that I threw out last week when I put together my my list of potential backup candidates for Trey Lance. I'm pretty sure that I had Flacco down in there. I'm thinking that I had put Marcus Mariota as the top guy with Flacco as a possibility. And the reason there is that the 49ers had interest in Flacco last year. If you remember, there were a bunch of the 49ers were going through it quite a bit, this was before the draft. They were linked to pretty much it seemed like every possible quarterback that was out there on the market. And so Flacco would be a name that I wouldn't have a problem with Joe Flacco coming in being your backup. He did a pretty good job last year in New York. I know he didn't. I'm not talking about the way that he played, but he was out there, and I think that he might have had a positive influence on Zach Wilson as well as John Beck. So I do feel pretty good if the 49ers were to go Flacco, save themselves some money in the process. That would be a name that I wouldn't get really upset about, because your expectation is that Lance is going to start 17 games, and even if he starts 15 or 16, I think Flacco would be okay for a game or two. Even if he goes 500, that's what Lance did this year as a rookie, and that's about what you'd expect out of your backup quarterback. Matthew says Kinlaw is Hurd 2.0. Remember how optimistic everyone was about Hurd, and that's correct, right, Matt? You need to be cautiously optimistic about these guys, because you never know. I'm just giving you the report that from what we heard. I wouldn't expect Kinlaw to be back. The problem with when it comes to Kinlaw is that the problem that they have there is I really feel like they're going to go this route. They're going to go the Javon Kinlaw route instead of DJ Jones. That goes back to some of the information that was shared today from Lynch with the local media, was that re-signing Jones is something that they would like to do, but it's going to be very challenging. He didn't make it easy on them with the strong season that he had in 2021. So that's the situation with DJ Jones. That's going to come down to what he gets on the open market. If somebody's going to give him a big number, they're not going to match it. I think if it's in under $5 million, they might be able to bring him back. If it's over that, I don't think he's going to be a 49er. I just think that it's going to be tough. And I think the 49ers are going to try to get Javon Kinlaw to be the guy there, and maybe use a guy like Kevin Givens and some of these other rotational pieces, maybe bring back Kentavious Street or so on. And that's going to be a tough one, because DJ Jones is a really good run blocker, run stuffer, does a pretty good job of rushing as well when he's asked to do that. The deal with Jones, the problem that he might have with re-signing with the 49ers is he only played 51% of the snaps last year. So that could be a little bit of an issue when it comes to DJ Jones coming back. Where do they allocate that money? So as Swan says here, I think that's definitely one where he could end up with the Jets or the Dolphins. They both those teams know him pretty well. We thought Jones is one of the players that I thought would end up with the Jets last year, right? I thought that Jones and K'Wan Williams, and there was a few others that were free agents, and we all thought that they were going to end up in New York a season ago because of Robert Saleh being out there, but that never materialized. So we'll see what happens with that in terms of him going to a place that already knows him. And then Ashley as Jack, in the beginning of the season, I watched a video where you said you'd start Lance. Now I always hear you say the opposite. Why is this? Appreciate you. Just wondering. There was a couple of things. I was high on Lance. I think I've gone through this a couple of times, but I'll do it again. Lance was impressive in the beginning of training camp, and he was making plays on a regular basis, and it was quite easy to see what he could bring to the table. The problem that I had with him and where it kind of changed for me was right around, I was on that track as up until I believe it was the Los Angeles Chargers preseason game. It wasn't really the Kansas City game as much, Swan, as it was more of the Chargers game, because what we saw was the 49ers tried to put him in with the starters against Kansas City. He struggled the first series, made a big play on the second on the shot play that was called. Then the following week, they went down and they did the practice in Costa Mesa. That's when Kyle Shanahan tried to get him into the starting lineup and work with him a little bit more with the starters during their during practice. From what I wasn't there. From what I heard, the practices were a little rough. They weren't quite up to the same level as what we had seen early on. And then in the game, if you remember, he struggled in that game at the beginning when he first got in, because if you remember that Chargers preseason game, Garoppolo had a long drive that took up almost the first quarter, and then Lance came in. I think both quarterbacks threw interceptions on the first two drives. I think Garoppolo threw a pick, and I think that Lance came out and threw a pick on the next one. And then he played pretty well once the backups started rolling in. So my issue or my concern was that it just didn't look like he was quite there yet. And I could be wrong. It just seemed that could be part of, maybe they still felt like he was further along than I did. And that could be part of the reason why they did the whole switch back and forth thing against the Raiders. Maybe their plan was that if Lance played at a really high level in that game, that he was going to take over the job from Garoppolo in week one. But at the same time, as I say that, and I've thought about this, at the same time, I go back and I remember that Raider game, and when they were doing the back and forth between Garoppolo and Lance, they weren't giving Lance the opportunities to throw. They were pretty much having Garoppolo in there, and when they put in Lance, it was usually some kind of a designed run. So I'm not sure how that all played out, but it was Ashley, to answer your question, it was around the time of the Chargers preseason game, and you can kind of just, the way that went, you can see that the direction that they were going. I've always been high on Trey Lance. I've always felt that he's a really good quarterback. If you heard some of the conversations I had with people away from the practice facility and talking about what I was seeing, and I was very high on Lance. I feel like he's an elite talent. He was my second favorite quarterback in the draft last year, when all was said and done, and I started to really was able to hone in on it. So that's the direction. That's the reason. And hopefully that answers. And I see that you said thanks there. So hope it works out. I agree with you. Hope it works out for the 49ers this year. I have not, Ultimate asked me if I have watched Arnold Ebbitt. I'm not even sure how to say his name, but the defensive end from Penn State, I have not. I have not dug into any of the draft guys yet. I just haven't had. I've been focused more getting ready on free agency. And what I will say is, because I did a lot of pre-draft film breakdowns last year, my promise to you is that what's going to happen on my channel is you'll see a lot more breakdowns post-draft once the 49ers make their picks. And the reason for that is because with where the 49ers are picking this year, we don't know. There's so much variation. Last year it was really easy to drill down because you pretty much knew it was going to be a quarterback. There was maybe an outside chance they were going to go offensive tackle or, maybe a different spot. But for the most part, you knew that it was going to be quarterback. So it was a little bit easier to do those pre-draft breakdowns last year. This year, what we'll do is I'll be focusing on those post draft and kind of showing you what their games look like from college and give you the pros and cons. And we're just try to drill down at that point. There may be a few later on once the visits start occurring and we have a few names that the 49ers are more interested in, because typically you get they have those pre-draft visits, and typically you can maybe find one or two that they're going to pick out of that group. So we'll see how that plays out. One other item that I want to hit on a couple of other items real quick before I need to jump off. I'm going to do this in about 5 minutes. Jason Verrett, John Lynch mentioned that the 49ers are open to bringing Jason Verrett back. His comment about Verrett really was that, at the cornerback position, that's a position which you can never have enough of those guys there, and that Jason is a really good one. And the problem is we all know, he just cannot stay healthy. And if the 49ers can work something out with Verrett and have him come in and have him try to compete for a starting spot, that would be a terrific way of getting in there and having a good secondary. So Verrett is a guy that may come back with the 49ers. We'll see. Keep our eyes open on that one. Also, another item that was brought up was the running backs, in particular, Trey Sermon, Elijah Mitchell. We all know that Elijah Mitchell had a fantastic rookie season, set a franchise record, 963 yards rushing, the most ever, despite only playing in 11 games. So a fantastic season out of Mitchell, who was picked in the 6th round. But it wasn't so good for Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon struggled, only had 41 carries on the season. Lynch was asked about that today, and what he had to say was that the 49ers still believe in Trey Sermon. That Sermon had a few adjustments that he needs to make, especially how they run in the NFL. And that's something that we heard during the season as well. When Sermon was struggling in the early going, there was definitely some information that was brought out. I believe it might have been Mike McDaniel who was talking about Sermon's needing to stay tighter to the hole, not quite so wide. He needed to keep that thing, get more upfield and those types of things. So definitely something to keep an eye on is how Trey Sermon. I know we talk about Trey and I keep wanting to say Trey Lance, but we really need to focus on Trey Sermon as somebody who needs to come out and step up and have a big season for the 49ers this season, especially if they aren't able to bring back Raheem Mostert. Lynch did say today that they do want to bring Mostert back, but again, that's a situation where, he's got to want to come back I don't think they're going to offer him much money. And if a team like Miami with Mike McDaniel wants to bring him in, or maybe, the New York Jets, they might not be able to bring him back. So we'll see how that goes for them. And then last but not least, the last one, and this was important, I felt, because we've been talking about this a little bit. The 49ers coaches stayed here in Santa Clara primarily because they're working on scheme. They're working on everybody coming together. But the big news from the 49ers coaching staff that came out today was with regards to Bobby Turner, the 49ers running back coach. He is not retiring. He is expected to be back with the 49ers next season in 2023. He's going to be taking 2022 off. He had a couple of procedures, I believe, on his knee. And so the expectation right now is that if everything goes smooth, he will be back with the 49ers in 2023. So that's good news regarding Bobby Turner. Not retiring. He'll still be back with the 49ers next year. So that's really positive news for the 49ers. And just kind of looking through real quick, I do want to throw this one up because I would appreciate it if we could do that. Dusty says, let's push Jack closer to 4,000 subs. Let's go. And I agree. That's my goal right now. I'm at 3,500 or so. My goal, quite frankly, is to try to get around 7,000 by the beginning of May. That's a big number because that's about twice of where I am right now. But if we could do that, that'd be fantastic. The one thing that I will say on my channel is that we're going to talk 49ers as much as possible. I'm going to give you positives and negatives. I'm a longtime 49ers fan. I've been a 49ers fan since the early 80s. First game I went to was in 1980. So I've been around the 49ers for a long time. In this new role that I'm in now, I take more of a journalistic approach to it where I don't have favorites. And so you get pretty straight talk from me. and that's why I think so many folks were calling me Jimmy Garoppolo Stan this season. Although I talked good about Garoppolo when he played good, I talked bad when I felt he played bad. And at the same time, I've always been a supporter of Trey Lance and thinking that down the road he was going to be good. Although that didn't call for him to start this year. So if you're watching the show and you're not already subscribed to the channel, if you could please help me out by hitting the that subscribe button. Also, if you could, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and then hit that little bell notification, because the bell notification is how you know that I'm on live. That way you don't miss any of these shows when we go on. And so that'd be fantastic. And one last thing, go over to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. Make that a favorite on your browser so that you can check it out on a daily basis. During this off season, I do try to update it Monday through Friday. Like I said, I am going to be out. I'm going to be here tomorrow for the Hammer and Nail show on Thursday, but I will not be back on. I do not plan on streaming on Friday through next Tuesday. I'm taking a vacation. I haven't gone on vacation since 2019, so I'm going on vacation. Hopefully my vacation will be as profitable for the 49ers as it was in 2019, because I took that trip, and then they ended up going to the Super Bowl that season, and that trip was right before the draft, or right after the draft, I believe it was. Actually, it was the week after the draft. So going a little bit earlier this time, but if you could subscribe, keep it locked in here, have that notification so you know we go live, and it'll be fun. So everybody, like I said, I'm jumping off. I'm going to be jumping on somebody else's show right now over with Ben Meyerson. If you want to check us out, we're going to be talking 49ers football over there. Otherwise, I will be back on my channel tomorrow night. Get over here at 5:30. Be locked in for the Hammer and Nail show when I'm joined by Jesse Naylor, and we break down a lot of different 49ers topics. Thanks again. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notification. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great night.